The point of corrections is treatment. While most prisons have been described as warehouses, I think that is a term more accurate for jails, there are numerous programs that are available, especially for federal inmates. On the state level, there are various programs available as well, but they vary, and it's very dependent on funding. This section discusses the various programs on a national level. First, due to the complexity, diversity, and the various needs of the inmates, finding the appropriate program or programs, and many need more than just one, is the key. Some programs are offered on an individual basis or one-on-one, such as psychiatric counseling. Others are provided for in the forms of groups like AA or Alcoholics Anonymous, or working on relationships. Domestic violence classes are generally held in groups. Rehabilitation efforts begin early in the inmate's correctional experience and continues until the end, until they're released. And when I say released, done serving their time, because they may be released to supervision, and then their treatment would continue in the community. So this section presents a selection of therapeutic methods. The cognitive behavioral theory, CBT, there are a number of individual techniques that are used within the prison system, including insight-based therapy, behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy. We're going to discuss the cognitive behavior theory. For offenders is, the cognitive behavior theory for offenders is based on the assumption that the foundations of criminal behavior are dysfunctional patterns of thinking. The intent is that by altering routine misrepresentations of life events, offenders can modify antisocial aspects of their personality and consequence behaviors. The goal of these interventions is to identify cognitive deficits linked to criminality, such as impulsivity, a concrete thinking style that impinges on the ability to appreciate the feelings and thoughts of others, impairments in self-defeating behavior, inability to reason critically, peer interpersonal problems, problem-solving skills, and a preoccupation with oneself. CBT in offender treatment targets the choices, the thoughts, the attitudes, and meaning systems that are associated with antisocial behavior as well as deviant lifestyle. It usually uses a training approach to teach new skills in areas where offenders showed deficits, such as generating alternative solutions rather than reacting on first impulse, interpersonal problems awareness, evaluating consequences, opening up, listening to others' perspectives, resisting peer pressure, soliciting feedback, taking the person's well-being into account, and deciding on what is the most beneficial course of action. Evaluations on these programs are found to be highly successful, especially with more dangerous hardcore offenders. Types of programs where CBT is involved, sex offender treatment, participate in this kind as well, not just the violent, dangerous, hardcore ones, even though sex offenders are dangerous as well. They get a specific type of CBT program. Learn a little bit more about that in corrections theory. Anger management, anger and lack of self-control. It's linked to violent behavior. It's linked to self-harm. It's linked to conflicts within the prison environment and with post-release supervision. There's programs to assist and teach inmates in how to control anger and impulsivity, usually done in a group setting with a therapist. And generally, it is not the only program an inmate will be a part of. They usually run together with something else like drug treatment or sex offender treatment. Then we have drug treatment programs. Drug treatment, for drug treatment, it's required. Correctional authorities have the responsibility for providing meaningful treatment programs for inmates. The federal corrections system uses the cognitive behavioral treatment type program relative to drug treatment. And these extensive programs include drug abuse education, non-residential drug abuse treatment for short-term offenders, and the residential drug abuse program, or the RDAP. This is the most intensive treatment program that follows the CBT model of treatment and is wrapped in a modified therapeutic model in which inmates learn what it is like in a pro-social community. Inmates live in a unit separate from the general population. Today, at least 89 of these programs are located in 77 locations in the United States. These programs serve both males and females. They are found at public and private facilities. The RDAP involves voluntary participation for 500 hours over the span of 9 to 12 months. There's a transitional drug abuse treatment program, TDAT, which requires a continuation of drug abuse treatment in the community after transfer to a residential reentry center, the RRC. Lots of these little terminologies. There's a lot of drug treatment programs in the federal prison system. We're just tapping into a few treatment studies on these programs that have been done in prison populations have found that when drug programs are well integrated, using effective program elements and implemented carefully, these programs reduce relapse, reduce criminality, reduce reoffending, reduce inmate misconduct, reduce mental illness, reduce behavioral disorders, increase the level of the inmate's stake in societal norms, increase levels of education and employment upon returning to the community, improve health and mental health symptoms and conditions, and improve relationships. Research has found that the effective drug treatment programs, 1, they focused on high-risk offenders, 2, provided strong inducements to receive treatment, included several types of interventions simultaneously, and 4, provided intensive treatment. Oh, and also had included aftercare components. So it was 5 components. With those 5 components in place, they seem to be relatively effective. The therapeutic community treatment is another approach that focuses on the total environment and uses all the experiences of that environment as the basic tools for therapeutic intervention. It's a community treatment group designed to divert drug users from the criminal justice system. The therapeutic communities vary in how much control they are given in prison settings, they being the inmates. There are a number of these programs across the country. It provides intensive treatment to male inmates who reside in a housing unit that lasts 9 to 12 months of the last 9 to 12 months of their prison term. All participants are volunteers, and formal programming occurs 4 hours a day on weekdays, and there's a long post-release program. Research that examines the effects of a dedicated drug treatment facility using therapeutic community models shows a substantial reduction in reoffending for those who have participated in the program. So another successful program, drug treatment. It's one of the most common treatments that's available inside prisons, even at the state level. The states have a number of drug treatment too. Another tool for treatment, not in the book, but I think it's important to raise, is animal training. The animal training component, where I can't seem to get my hands on the information on animal training, but another approach is increasing in popularity, which involves inmates in animal training. The dog training programs, there's actually a couple as of right now, kind of new, Colorado and Ohio. CARE, Canine Assisted Reentry. Dogs spend 9 weeks at correctional facilities, work camps, being trained by inmates who serve as trainers, handlers, and caretakers. The inmates teach the dogs to sit, stay, come, and walk on their owner's side without pulling on a leash. At the end of 9 weeks, the dogs are tested to make sure they have learned all their skills before graduation from the program. The inmates have been trained by professional dog trainers in hopes that they will be able to find employment in animal services upon release. So that is another type of treatment program. Educational programs in adult institutions. Academic education is usually available through adult basic education programs, ABE. Secondary and general education studies, post-secondary education programs, and social education programs. In a great many correctional systems, mandatory education is required of those inmates who manifest clearly defined educational deficiencies, like no high school education. They're going to be a component that a GED is required. College courses have been provided through live instruction, correspondence courses, television hookups, and release time, which allows inmates to attend educational institutions in the community. Community colleges have offered inmates courses leading to a 2-year degree. And it is said that improving inmates' educational skills could reduce repeat offending through various mechanisms. We won't go into all of those. Research studies have found that educational program participation was related to reducing rates of reoffending. However, in spite of evidence that post-secondary correctional education reduces repeat offending and improves institutional adjustment, prisoners have been denied access to higher education and Pell Grants, which provide college loans with beneficial repayment rules, as you may all be aware of. College prison programs have also been reduced, primarily because prison systems administration increasingly believe that prisoners do not need the frills of post-secondary schooling. One program that has continued to offer prisoners a college education is Hudson Link, which was founded in 1998. I think it's important to mention this because it's in New York. Hudson Link brought college education back to Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York with the help of private funding. The first graduating class included 17 students receiving a BA in Organizational Management, granted by Nyack College. Since inception, Hudson Link has expanded its services to now contains courses sponsored by additional institutions, including Mercy College, SUNY Sullivan, Vassar College, and Siena College. Hudson Link currently serves 5 facilities in New York State, including Sing Sing, Sullivan Correctional, Fishkill Correctional, Green Correctional, and Taconic Women's Correctional. Each of these 5 facilities offers a college preparation course, life skills development courses, and college-level courses. And Hudson Link now provides community service and programs for release for those released Hudson Link alumni. So what a great program that is. And I'm happy that it's in New York. It's in southwestern part of the state area, that general area. From what I gather, that's what I know. I believe that's where all the locations are, southern to western part of the state. Vocational training. The need for vocational training has always been evident because most inmates can be educated, and they're also trainable, but they lack any regular work experience or any skills in a trade that they can demonstrate having in a trade. The basic purpose of vocational training then is to prepare inmates for jobs in the community. And in prisons across the nation, including New York, there's similar programs that are offering skill training in printing, barbering, welding, meat cutting, machine shop, electronics, baking, plumbing, computer programming, television, radio repair, bus repair, air conditioning maintenance, automotive repair, sheet metal work. There's a whole laundry list of these. Furniture repair, upholstery. Few vocational programs, though, exist for women in correctional institutions. The vocational programs for women typically include cosmetology, secretarial training, business machine operation, data processing, baking and food preparation, and childcare. But recently, this pattern has been changing in some women's prisons. For example, here's another New York State prison, Bedford Hills Correction Facility. It's the only maximum security prison for women in New York. It offers women programs in horticulture, printing, and waste management. Participation in vocational programs is seen as a means of reducing repeat offending. It is assumed that the acquisition of vocational skills such as goal setting, motivation, commitment, and technical and non-technical knowledge increases an offender's legitimate employment opportunities once they're released or following their release. Research has found from an examination of 33 evaluations of vocational and work programs that participants are employed at a higher rate and repeat in offending at a lower rate than non-participants. Similarly, the inmates who participate in work release programs have better success rates, and work release has shown effectiveness in reducing repeat offending for those who participate in it. And I should take a note and say work release is a prison program that allows inmates to be released during the day to work in the community, and then they return to prison after work to where they stay. It's a work release program. And despite these successes or indications of success, the reality is that the crowded conditions in today's prisons only permit a small percentage of inmates to participate in vocational programs. So education, vocational programs. I feel like I have one more. It was on my last list, I think, religion. Religion instructions are types of programs, treatment. Instructions and services are always provided in federal, state, and private prisons. There is generally a full-time Protestant and Roman Catholic chaplains are available in most prisons. However, the prisons recognize all denominations of religion. The emphasis on religion in prison has grown due in part to President George W. Bush's creation of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. In 2003, Florida Governor Jeb Bush dedicated the first faith-based prison in the United States. It was a 750-bed medium security facility for men in Lottie, Florida. In 2004, Florida converted what was then the all-male Hillsborough Correctional Institution in the nation's first faith-based correctional facility for women. At least 5 states, Texas, Kansas, Minnesota, Florida, and Iowa, have opened new prison facilities in which the central philosophy involves religious teaching. In March 2004, the Corrections Corporation of America, the private prison system, announced its interest in developing faith-based correctional facilities. And in 2014, they announced that it now employs chaplains and program facilitators who offer inmate residents a variety of worship services, as well as faith-based counseling and religious resources to address practical and spiritual needs. And these professionals design and deliver a continuum of care that approaches and treats the inmates as the quote-unquote the total person by addressing such social problems as addiction, education, and faith in integrative programs and therapeutic living communities. The CCA clients are provided with a variety of rehabilitative opportunities. So religion is another type of program that's available both at the federal and the state level of prisons. But does it work? Can rehab work? And there are two views. I already gave some examples of where it was shown or suggested that it worked, but there are still some questions about its effectiveness, with overcrowded prisons and limited opportunities for participation in such programs, the question is it really helping? And according to critics, one such of them, Robert Martinson, who conducted a study on treatment programs, which he concluded they had minimal effect. However, I do want to note that his study was done in 1975. And today, despite overcrowdedness and lack of funding and opportunities, there are actually more programs now than there ever have been before. And there's more recent research that indicates that some things do work, as I pointed out. So 1975, there may not have been enough programs available. Maybe there was drug treatment. Maybe there was anger management. But the treatment has evolved since 1975. So the reliance on that critic, I don't know if I would take at face value at this point, because they have changed. Correctional officers controlling inmate behavior is a complex task, as the book says. Despite the existence of various prison staff, it is the correctional officer, the CO, we're going to use for short, that is primarily in direct contact with the inmates. In the past, they were generally viewed as ruthless people who enjoyed power over inmates. While some may still have that idea, generally COs are considered public servants. Most are in favor of rehabilitation efforts and do not particularly harbor ill will toward the inmates. They face many challenges in their positions. They work in underfunded, overcrowded facilities and sometimes with very violent and dangerous people. In these situations, COs report being very stressful, job stress, and even job burnout. Another issue is their conflicting roles. Traditionally, they fell in line with tough on crime. Their sole role was to maintain security and order. Now they advocate for rehabilitation. Now they must be prepared to deal with inmates on a personal level. Some of them have to report on their behavior. The most successful COs are the ones that conduct themselves professionally and gain the respect and cooperation of the inmates. In doing so, they are able to have a very positive influence on inmates' readjustment in society. There are female correctional officers. They work at both male and female institutions. This has not affected, the research shows this has not affected the inmates or the prison atmosphere negatively. Inmate discipline has not suffered due to the inclusion of women. The women are rarely involved in sexual assaults. The biggest complaints of having women in the facility are actually coming from the male CO peers, not the inmates. Commentators believe that having women COs may actually be beneficial for the self-image of inmates and improve relationships, CEO and inmate relationships. Assignment to male institutions is often a career enhancement for female correctional officers, where there's more in female prisons, but there is not a lot of female prisons. So female prison guards must be employed at the male institutions. They don't particularly have restricted duties at women's prisons. They generally are equally available and around as the men. There are certain duties that are assigned for certain tasks. Let's use strip searches. Female CO cannot do a strip search of a male inmate, and vice versa. Male can't do it for a female. That's also how it runs with law enforcement when they have to do a search. And I use that example because it seems obvious that you need the same gender to conduct that kind of search. Otherwise, there could be claims of, misconduct. So that concludes this portion of the topic. We have a couple more. We have the prisoner's rights to discuss, and we have to talk about life after prison, or i.e. parole.